Annette and Micah were having brunch when their conversation strayed to their upcoming high school reunion. The two former classmates and now colleagues began trading stories about who married whom, who worked here and there, and what changed about this and that. Remember Samantha? Oh God, it's been ages since I saw her. Do you know what happened to her? Annette asked Micah. No, I haven't heard anything about her. I guess no one remained in touch with her, came Micah's answer. Obviously, Annette said, rolling her eyes at her friend. Who would want to be associated with that poor girl? She added defensively. And we were never good to her, so it's not at all surprising she didn't keep in touch with anyone, Micah said. She shuddered at the memory. They were really mean to Samantha in high school. The girl used to go to school in old clothes. Because of this, their classmates, who were well up in terms of social class, used to make fun of her. They would call Samantha a dirty beggar and nickname her Dirty Sammy. They would often play not-so-harmless pranks on her, put glue on her chair, throw garbage in her bag, and throw food at her, among others. The girl didn't pay them any mind, which annoyed the bullies, so they would pull worse pranks just to get a rise out of her. But Samantha never fought back, although Micah did see her crying silently one time when the kids poured soup on her at lunchtime. Micah, who, like any other kid, didn't want to get on the bad side of the bullies or else they'd turn on her too, never tried to help out, even if she was eaten by guilt and pity at times. So she just stood around, laughed when she was expected to, and participated when she was urged to. Samantha, despite the humiliation and hurt, decided to pay them no mind and focus on her goal, to graduate and get out of that hellhole. They weren't always poor. In fact, her parents were once famous geologists known in various states and countries. They even used to travel around the world for her parents' work. However, when her father got sick and kind of old, the community turned its backs on them. They said they didn't need old and sickly experts who would only slow them down, as most of their saved-up money was spent on her father's medical needs. They ended up with almost nothing. Because she got good grades, she qualified for a scholarship at a prestigious school, where the bullies looked down on people they considered beneath them, and they considered Samantha as such. Her clothes, which the kids always made fun of, were usually from friends and family who took pity on them but couldn't afford to buy her new clothes, so they just gave her their old ones. For that, she and her parents were grateful. It didn't matter that they were old as long as they protected her skin from the hot sun in the summer and provided her warmth during the winter. And so Samantha continued to go to school, driven to get good grades so she could give her parents a better life. She tried not to show the kids any reaction whenever she was bullied, as she thought they'd eventually get bored of her and move on to their next prey, no matter how callous that sounded. She didn't know that her indifference would only fuel her bully's desire to make her life miserable. Although the teachers knew of this, they couldn't do anything, as the leader of the group was Annette, whose parents were one of the top shareholders of the school, so they chose to look the other way. When they graduated, no one heard from her again, and no one tried to get in touch with her either. Why don't we invite her this time? Annette asked, which pulled Micah out of her musings. Who? Samantha, duh, haven't you been paying attention? Annette answered, annoyed. She was used to having people wait on her hand and foot and hang on to whatever she would say next. Simply put, she was a spoiled princess, a prima donna. Micah had no choice but to hang out with her, since she was working under Annette. Sometimes Annette was tolerable, as she was just being her spoiled self. But there were times, like now, when it was embarrassing to be with her, and to know her, basically. Why should we? We never invited her in 10 years, so what's the point now? Micah didn't like the glint in Annette's eyes. It meant she was up to no good again. But Annette was not listening, and instead grabbed her phone to look for Samantha's social media. When she found it, Annette laughed and showed Micah Samantha's display picture, a flower in the center, and a blurred variety of food in the background. I bet she's so fat she can't even show herself on camera, Annette said cruelly. Hey, stop, just let her be, Micah chided. But it was too late. Annette had already sent her the invitation to the reunion. Our venue changed, Annette said nonchalantly. What do you mean it changed? Well, I told Samantha it would be at Samantha's. You know, one of the posh restaurants in town. Imagine Samantha, our dirty Sammy, coming inside a restaurant named after her, but unlike her, the place is extremely elite. I cannot wait to see the contrast. Annette laughed. When she saw that Micah wasn't laughing, she said, "Hey, isn't it funny? Come on, it would be just like the old times." "I don't know, Annette. I really don't think it's a good idea." But Annette just shrugged her concerns off and launched into a different topic. That night, Samantha checked her personal Facebook account and saw a message from a certain Annette. "I only know of one Annette, and the one I knew wouldn't be sending me a message," she thought to herself. When she opened the message, it was indeed from the Annette that she knew. Her bully. "Is anything wrong? Your brows are hunched together again," said Walter, whose approach she didn't even notice. "I received an invitation to a reunion from one of my high school nemesis," she told her husband. "You want to go?" Walter asked gently. He had heard of the horrors his wife went through in her youth. "I don't know. I don't really want to, but I also want to show them that I'm no longer the girl they used to make fun of. I want to see if I can face them and not tremble in fear." Her trauma was deep and understandable. "I would love that for you, just so you can finally close that dreadful chapter of your life. But I want you to be sure. I want to know if you're ready for that, for them," Walter said, as he wrapped his arms around his lovely wife. "Thank you. I'll think about it," Samantha murmured, as she let sleep envelop her, cocooned in her husband's strong arms. On the day of the reunion, the affair was well on its way, and Annette had been eyeing the door, waiting to see if Samantha would show up. One of them, Larry, noticed. "Are we waiting for someone? You keep looking at the door whenever people enter," he asked. "Well, I actually invited Samantha. Remember her? She's the poor girl we never invited. But I wanted to see how poor and fat she is now," Annette said mockingly. "What? You invited her for what, Annette?" Larry said aghast. "Well, duh, I'm curious. And I wanted to see the people's faces when they saw a beggar-like woman enter this very high-end restaurant." "Oh my God, Annette, have you not grown up at all?" said another of their classmates. "What is wrong with you people? It's as if you didn't make fun of her either," came Annette's sharp retort. "We did, yes," answered Larry. "But I've since realized that what we did to her was very wrong. As a father, it hurt to see my child vying for her friend's attention. And what we did to Samantha was worse than that. Well, it's good you invited her. We can finally apologize to her," Larry continued. "What do you mean, apologize?" Annette shrieked. "You are the heir to your father's company, Larry, while the rest of you are holding directory positions. I, myself, am managing one of my father's subsidiaries, and what? Apologize? You've got to be kidding me. Why should rich and educated people like us apologize to a beggar girl?" Before anyone could berate her for her mean attitude and high-handedness, a woman approached their table and timidly said hi. The former classmates exchanged baffled looks, wondering who this sophisticated woman was. "Hi, miss, you seem to be at the wrong table," Micah said kindly. The woman was wearing simple clothes, but she screamed quiet wealth. "It's me, Samantha." At that, all of them gawped. It was Larry who called himself first. "Hey, Samantha, I didn't recognize you. Here, have a seat." He then pulled a chair for her, noticeably far from Annette. "You look different," Annette said as she looked her up and down with obvious disdain. "Did you marry an old rich guy?" "Annette," Micah chided quietly. "What? I was just asking," she said defensively. "Well, my husband's not as rich as you guys are, but we get by," Samantha said humbly. "So, do you have a sugar daddy then? I recognize your clothes. I know you can't afford them." "Annette, stop," Larry told her firmly. He then faced Samantha and said, "I'm sorry for her behavior. She must have had one too many drinks. And while I'm at it, let me apologize for our behavior in high school. Yes, Samantha, I hope you find it in your heart to forgive us. I won't make excuses for what we did, even if we were young. We knew the difference between right and wrong, and we chose to do the latter," one of the classmates chimed in. "We're really sorry, Samantha," Micah said quietly, immensely embarrassed by their actions. When Samantha smiled, all of them breathed a collective sigh of relief. "Thank you for apologizing. I'm glad you realized your wrongdoing and were mature enough to own up to it. In that case, I have to be mature as well and accept your apologies," she smiled. It felt like a heavy load had been lifted off her chest. The waiter then approached and greeted her. "Hi, boss," Marky said it cheekily. He was her cousin and was now working in her restaurant. "What would you like?" "It's fine, I'm not staying long." But be sure to pay extra attention to them, she said, motioning to her former classmates. Marky playfully saluted and moved to the next table. Once again, her former classmates gasped. They couldn't believe what they just saw. Samantha's was hers after all. Micah smiled to herself. Annette's plan to humiliate Samantha at Samantha's backfired. It wasn't just a coincidence that their former classmate shared the same name with one of the most famous restaurants in town. Unable to accept how things turned out, Annette scoffed and said, "You own Samantha's, and yet you're telling us you don't have an old rich man sponsoring you. How ridiculous." "That's enough, Annette." Larry then gave Annette a smoldering look, basically telling her to shut up. "What's wrong with you people? Can't you see the flaw in her logic? Dirty Sammy owning one of the most sought-after restaurants in town. On her own merit? I don't think so," Annette accused. Before anyone could speak, Walter, a famous actor turned businessman, approached their table, put his hands on Samantha's shoulder and asked tenderly, "Are you ready to go?" "Yes," she smiled at her husband, before she turned to her former classmates. "Guys, this is Walter, my husband. I'm sorry, but I have to run. Please feel free to stay. Go ahead and order more. It's on me," Samantha added before she said goodbye. As the classmates watched the striking couple leave the restaurant and got into their sleek car, no one was able to speak. When Marky once again passed their table and asked, "Would you like anything else? I can't let Samantha's friends starve or else she'll fire me." Micah turned to him and said politely, "No, we're good, thank you." Once Marky left, all charters resumed. All of them were in awe at how Samantha's life had turned out. They were happy to see that despite the unmistakable trauma they gave her, she was able to power through it and make a better life for herself. They were both proud of her and mortified by their actions. Annette, on the other hand, walked out when her former classmates berated her for her actions then and now. In the car, Samantha reached for her husband's hands. "Thank you for coming. They apologized, which I appreciate, but I didn't feel comfortable enough for me to stay, so thanks for saving me." She said this as she brushed a kiss on her husband's cheek. "All for you, my love," Walter replied as he kissed Samantha's hand. He was happy that Samantha had finally put this behind her. Although it never affected her in her everyday life, he knew his wife was scarred from that experience, and now he saw that Samantha's eyes twinkled a little more brightly. Samantha thought it would be hard to find it in herself to forgive her tormentors, but when she saw how genuinely they regretted their actions, it was easy for her to accept their apologies. She now has a lighter heart. She held Walter's hand tightly, communicating how grateful she was for the quiet strength he offered.